Right now, somewhere, a former US president is wearing a watch that costs about $20. A man worth over $100 billion goes on television in a $70 dive watch. And the best-selling watch in human history, worn at Wimbledon, named in a US military threat document, and strapped to the wrists of heads of state and insurgents alike, costs less than a round of drinks. That watch is the Casio F-91W. It runs on a battery about the size of a fingernail. No sapphire crystal, no automatic movement, no heritage boutique in Geneva, and nobody famous was ever paid to wear one. Casio has sold something like 3 million a year for more than 35 years. Most people assume they already know what a Casio is. Mostly they don't. Casio Computer Company started in Shibuya in 1946, and not as a watch company. It made calculators and precision instruments for people who had work to do, rather than objects of desire for people who didn't. That shows up in the watches even now. They're built to be useful, to be accurate, and to be affordable to more or less anyone. Casio got into watchmaking in the 1970s, which happened to be a terrible decade to be Swiss. A quartz crystal vibrating 32,768 times a second kept better time than any gear train ever had, and it needed no winding, no servicing, and no ceremony around it. Switzerland called that the quartz crisis. Casio treated it as an opening. In 1989, a Casio designer named Ryusuke Moriai set out to make something small, flat, and simple. The F-91W you can buy this afternoon is essentially the watch he drew. That isn't nostalgia keeping it alive, and it isn't a marketing decision. 35 years of engineers have looked at it and not found much worth changing. Put one next to a $5,000 Swiss mechanical and ask a single question. Which one tells better time? It isn't close. The Casio is rated to 30 seconds a month either direction. A typical mechanical drifts 5 to 20 seconds a day, so figure 150 to 600 seconds a month, up to 20 times worse than the $20 digital sitting next to it on the table. One reviewer spent 11 months tracking an A158W, the stainless version, against official US time standards, and found it off by a handful of seconds a month, comfortably inside Casio's tolerance, they wrote, and frankly better than the spec promises. The mechanical will want a service in about 5 years, which is a few $100s. The F-91W's battery runs 7 years, and when it finally dies, you can buy a new one for under $2 and change it yourself in about 4 minutes. The case is resin, the crystal is acrylic. People have run these over with cars, hit them with hammers, boiled them, and dropped them off things they had no business dropping them off, and the watches keep going. Some of that is deliberate engineering, because Casio did build real durability into it. Most of it is that the materials are honest. There's nothing fragile in there pretending to be invulnerable. So a $20 watch keeps better time than watches costing 100 times more, outlasts them, asks less of you, and has gone 3 decades without needing a serious redesign. At some point, you have to ask what the rest of the industry is actually selling. In 1981, a Casio engineer named Kikuo Ibi bumped into someone on a Tokyo pavement and dropped his watch. It was the one his father had given him, with everything a gift from a father carries, and it came apart on the ground. He went home, and then he wrote a company proposal with a single line in it, a durable watch that would not break even if dropped. That's the whole brief. Casio gave him 2 colleagues. The 3 of them called themselves Project Team Tough, and the spec they were handed bordered on absurd. 10 meters of drop, 100 meters of water, 10 years of battery. In 1981, no watch on Earth managed any one of those, let alone all 3 in the same case. They built more than 200 prototypes and broke every single one. IB has described testing them by throwing them out of the bathroom window at the office, which is not how you'd design the experiment now, though it answered the question fast, and it cost nothing. By his own account, he was close to quitting when he sat down in a park near the office and watched some kids bouncing a rubber ball around. The ball took every impact and handed it back. The team had spent months trying to armor the movement, and the ball pointed the other way entirely. Suspend the module inside the case at a few precise contact points, and let a hollow structure absorb the shock instead of resisting it. He called it the floating module, and it's still the basic idea inside every G-Shock made since. The DW5000C went on sale in April 1983, a watch nobody upstairs had believed in, built out of a broken gift and 1 sentence. Then it did something odder than selling well. By the late 80s, American soldiers were wearing the chunky DW5600 as unofficial field kit, and so were firefighters farmers, and rescue divers who needed a watch that could take what they were taking. Hip-hop picked it up next. That oversized resin case looked deliberately unglamorous at a moment when plenty of people were arguing about what luxury was even worth, and it turned into a streetwear fixture. By the 90s, you'd find the identical watch on underground artists and on elite military units, which is not a trick many products manage. Casio passed its 100 millionth G-Shock, then its 130th millionth. It had invented a whole category, shock resistance, then priced it under $100 so anyone could have it. The Swiss houses, selling at 100 to 1,000 times that price, said publicly that they weren't concerned. To understand what Casio disrupted, you have to remember what the Swiss industry used to be. Before quartz, it was the watch industry, full stop. Those mountain valleys held thousands of tiny workshops, turning out components for the most precise instruments an ordinary person could own. And the whole thing ran on prestige, craft, and a decent amount of arrogance. Quartz dismantled it. Between 1970 and the late 80s, Swiss watchmaking employment fell by more than half, and towns that existed solely to make watches watched their reason for existing evaporate. Casio's answer through all of it never changed. Timekeeping is for everyone. Accuracy and shock resistance weren't the end of the questioning either. Casio kept asking what else it could stop demanding from the person wearing the thing, and eventually the answer came back: the battery. Tough solar models charge off any light at all, sunlight or a desk lamp, or the general glow of an office ceiling, and some hold 6 months of reserve in complete darkness. The watch you plug in every night is asking you for something. This one isn't. You put it on, and it runs through drawer time and holidays and whole years when you weren't thinking about it, and it's right when you pick it up. Vanishing into your life until you need it is the quality every luxury brand writes about in its catalog copy, and almost none of them deliver. Casio puts it in the case, the movement, and the battery for what most people spend on lunch. The F-91W is the plain expression of all this. $20. Resin case, digital display, 7-year battery, 30 seconds a month. It weighs almost nothing. It goes under any cuff, and it asks nothing of you beyond a glance when you want to know the time. The A158W is the same module in a steel case on a link bracelet for around $30, and at a distance, most people read it as a considerably more serious watch. It isn't one. The materials are just heavier. The one Bill Gates wears is the Duro, and it goes underwater. 200 meters of water resistance, a unidirectional bezel that meets dive watch safety standards, plain reliable quartz, about $70. He co-founded Microsoft. He could wear anything that has ever been made. He wears that on national television and appears to think about it roughly as much as you'd think about a pen. The MTP line takes the same philosophy somewhere formal. Clean analog dial, steel case, quartz good to 20 seconds a month, $40 to $60. And it looks close enough to the entry-level Swiss dress watches selling at $400 that nobody asks. Wear one with a suit. It reads as a tasteful choice. The G-Shock is that philosophy pushed hard the other direction. The watch for days when your equipment might genuinely have to do something. When you're out in weather with tools in your hands and a sapphire crystal would shatter where an acrylic one bounces and carries on ticking. If what you want is the visual language of a luxury sports chronograph, there's the edifice. 3 subdials, tachymeter scale, sapphire crystal, brushed surfaces set against mirror-polished edges, under $200. The Tag Heuer Formula 1, it clearly echoes, starts at $2,000. Same design idea, same racing look, same presence on a wrist. The extra $1,500 buys you the logo and a mechanical chronograph rather than a quartz one. And for most people on most days, that difference lives entirely in theory. The luxury watch market was worth somewhere between $30 and $85 billion globally in 2026, depending on whose figures you trust. However you count it, that's a staggering amount of money spent on objects whose main job is done better by watches costing under $50. Some of that money does buy something real, and this is where I'd push back on the cheap version of this argument. True hand finishing is an extraordinary craft and worth what people pay for it. It just isn't about telling the time, and it never really was. The rest of it is identity. The logo, the boutique, the recognition, the conversation you're hoping to start, or the one you're hoping to avoid. Barack Obama wore an F-91W, not as a statement, just as a watch. Gates wears the Duro to interviews because he has no need for a watch to speak on his behalf. which GQ UK described as an unstatusy statement from one of the world's richest men. Serena Williams won Wimbledon in 2012 wearing a Casio computer watch. Ryan Gosling has been photographed in an A168W. These are people for whom the price of a watch means nothing at all, and they wear these because these do exactly what they promise, without any drama about it. Watch collecting is full of people who know a tremendous amount about craft and history and mechanical ingenuity, and it's also, now and then, a spending contest where what you paid gets quietly confused with the taste you have. The average collector puts over $3,000 a year into the hobby and accumulates a drawer of watches that go months without leaving it. The person in that room wearing the Casio isn't making some point about money. They know what a watch is for. They know what they're getting, and they've worked out that what they're getting for $20 is the same thing, or better, than what the man next to them paid 100 times over for. Outside those arguments, in the places where a watch has to actually work, the G-Shock's record does the talking. Militaries around the world adopted it as a field standard, and not because their procurement budgets were tight. Field use is a more brutal test than any review ever written. When you're somewhere gear fails, in extreme cold or rain or mud or repeated impact or underwater, you reach for whatever has already worked. For 40 years, that has kept being the G-Shock, and that U.S. military document that flagged the F-91W as a possible threat indicator, on the grounds that it kept appearing on wrists across every culture and context and income level, was accidentally the most accurate description of Casio's achievement anyone has written. A watch cheap enough, reliable enough, and universal enough to turn up everywhere isn't a red flag. It's a product brief executed to the letter. There's one more thing, and it doesn't fit on a spec sheet anywhere. These watches accumulate a life. They don't sit in a safe. They go to school with you, and to the hospital on the night your kid is born, and to countries you turned up in with a backpack and no plan. They get scratched. They get soaked. They survive things you only just survived yourself. The marks on the case aren't evidence of neglect. They're evidence it was there. A $10,000 watch teaches you to be careful with it, which is a strange thing to want from an object you're supposed to wear. IB built the G-Shock, so nobody would have to feel what he felt looking at his father's watch in pieces on the pavement. That's an odd thing to find, sitting at the bottom of a product specification, and it's still in there, in the fact that when you drop yours, it bounces and carries on, and keeps showing you the time, and asks for nothing back. One Watch for Life was never about owning the most impressive watch available. It's about the one you can count on. The industry has been telling the same old story for a long while. That precision requires hand decoration. That durability requires exotic steel. That the act of keeping time is difficult and rare enough to justify spending months of someone's salary on the instrument that does it. Casio has spent 80 years contradicting that without ever raising its voice, mostly by making watches that work. Watches that keep better time than things costing 50 times more. Watches that hold up in conditions the expensive ones wouldn't. Watches worn by some of the most powerful people alive, who haven't lost their minds so much as kept hold of their sense of proportion. Obama wore an F-91W. Gates wears a Duro. Serena won Wimbledon in a Casio. If there's one on your wrist, you're in genuinely distinguished company. If there isn't, and somewhere along the line you absorbed the idea that a watch is only worth wearing when it's also worth mentioning, take this as a polite, reasonably well-evidenced invitation to reconsider. One Watch for Life. Accurate, reliable, tough. Light enough that you forget it's on you. $20 since 1989, and right every single morning when you look at it. Calling that a compromise gets the whole thing backwards. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe and click the next video on your screen for another interesting breakdown on your favorite watches.